Coming in at number 10, we have the Wild West themed Xavier Gang. In an alternate Marvel universe that bears an incredible resemblance to America in the 1800s, a band of outlaws known as the Xavier Gang are plaguing a small town in Arizona, with every mutant member of the team being individually mind-controlled by a distant and diabolical version of Professor Charles Xavier. Using this team of the X-Men as puppets made up of both superheroes and supervillains, this Western crook version of Xavier was only defeated once a multiverse-spanning team of X-Men showed up to put an end to his mind-controlling ways. Coming in at number 9, we have the bloodthirsty Vampire Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bitten and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become leader of the vampires. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty frightening rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting combination. Coming in at number 8, we have perhaps the most infamous X-Men palette swap with Dark Beast. Originally hailing from the alternate timeline known as the Age of Apocalypse, this version of Hank McCoy was a twisted mad scientist working under the tutelage of Mr. Sinister, striving to create the most powerful mutants possible, no matter the cost. Although this messed up future would be prevented by the X-Men, Dark Beast was wily enough to find a way into the main Marvel universe and avoid his existence being erased. Ever since, he's been a persistent thorn in the X-Men's side, and a particular burden on Beast, who would much rather that someone didn't use his genius for evil. Coming in at number 7, we have the possessed Shadow Professor X from Earth 6141. Isn't that a mouthful? During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind throughout the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes. Coming in at number 6, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real lasting damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle. Coming in at number 5, we have the group known as Sinister's Six, and surprisingly, this isn't just a bunch of Spider-Man villains. A group of 6 red-eyed clones of the X-Men working for Mr. Sinister, this villainous group did have a few run-ins with the Wallcrawler, but only during the series known as Spider-Man and the X-Men, so it all works out. These evil clones were initially an intense obstacle preventing the real X-Men from getting closer to Mr. Sinister's schemes, but would ironically eventually be defeated by the same condition that seems to always follow Spider-Man related clone stories: cellular degeneration. Better luck next time, Sinister Six. Coming in at number 4, we have the twisted Bobby Drake, aka Iceman of the Age of Apocalypse universe. In a world where Apocalypse has taken over mutant kind and only Magneto and a few X-Men are capable of fighting back, the usually optimistic Bobby Drake was forged into a heartless warrior, giving him much stronger control of his ice powers than other depictions of the character, and becoming a living streak of ice that can travel instantly through water to lethal effect. This version of Iceman would eventually betray his teammates and ally himself with Dark Beast, and was only eventually able to be defeated by having his head shoved inside a furnace, a surefire way to finally melt this evil Iceman. Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, known fittingly enough as BLOODSTORM. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made BLOODSTORM one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men ever had to face. Coming in at number 2, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Magneto might often be an enemy of the X-Men, but in recent years has allied himself with them more often than not. This version of Magneto, however, is much more cynical and dark than the more complex figure of the regular Marvel Universe. And when he believed his children had been killed by Dr. Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global genocide. Switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum, this version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast directly to the head. And finally, coming to our top spot, we have another version of Professor Charles Xavier, or more specifically, the part of his mind known as Onslaught. For years, Professor X has done all he can to achieve peace and prosperity for mutant kind, while not allowing his anger at humanity to get the better of him. But after all this time of psychically repressing every dark and evil thought he ever had, Xavier had made the perfect ticking time bomb. And when he briefly had a mental battle with his best frenemy, Magneto, a portion of Magneto's less held back personality combined with all of the darkness in Xavier's heart and created one of the most dangerous psychic creations of all time, the villain known as Onslaught. A personality made up of the worst possible versions of both Professor X and Magneto, Onslaught is the pinnacle of what can happen when the X-Men go bad.
Starting us off in at number 10, Black Flash. The actual physical representation of death for all speedsters, Black Flash is the Grim Reaper of the Speed Force. Making his first appearance in The Flash Volume 2, number 138 back in 1998, he was seen before the deaths of several speedsters including Barry Allen, Johnny Quick, and Bart Allen. But he also tried to return Wally West to the Speed Force, but was unsuccessful, taking Linda Park instead, Wally's girlfriend. Black Flash eventually did return to try to claim Wally again, freezing time for everyone without a connection to the Speed Force to do so, but thanks to the combined efforts of multiple speedsters, Wally was able to race Black Flash until the end of time, causing death to have no meaning. The CW Black Flash, which was really just Hunter Zolomon aka Zoom, was killed during season 3 when Savitar lured him out of the Speed Force and then Killer Frost froze him, resulting in her first kill that actually turned out to be her ex as well. Dare I say, ice cold. But that didn't stop the Speed Force anyway, since later on Barry Allen returned in the Flash Rebirth storyline in the comics, becoming the new Black Flash. So this is also a version of the original Flash as well as a separate entity. In at 9, Inertia. The bitter feud between the Allen family and the Thawne family would span generations. Even in the 30th century, President Thawne sought to recruit Bart Allen in his revenge campaign against the Allens, since Bart was half Thawne himself. When that failed, Thawne mixed Bart's DNA with Thawne's genetic material to create a speedster clone who he named Thaddeus Thawne. Whereas Bart grew in a hyper-accelerated world, Thaddeus' childhood was the exact opposite, because of course it was, he's the reverse. His development was super slow, which led the young speedster to become more calculated and methodical. Thaddeus was also taught to hate the Allen family, and Impulse in particular. In addition to this modification, Thaddeus' growth and development was slowed. This is in contrast to Bart's accelerated development. However, after killing Bart, Wally West had other plans. Upon hearing of Bart's death, an enraged Flash hunted Inertia down. Though he thought of killing him, Flash decided instead to do something worse. He used his abilities to slow Inertia's movements down to the point where he was totally immobile, essentially a living statue, and then he placed Inertia on display at the Flash Museum, facing statues of Bart Allen as Impulse and Kid Flash. He could still think, see, and hear in normal time, but was frozen in place. Inertia was then just doomed to spend an eternity in a state of near total paralysis, staring at images of the guy he killed. And at 8, Godspeed. August Hart is the former detective partner of Barry Allen. August was the only witness to Barry's accident that turned him into the Flash, and while going after a criminal organization called the Black Hole, August was struck by lightning during a Speed Force storm in Central City. August became the ruthless vigilante known as Godspeed, and got his revenge on the man who he suspected to have killed his brother. He had given up on the justice system since his brother's killer had gone free, and with his newfound power, had the ability to become judge, jury, and executioner. August realized after he had gotten his powers that he also had the ability to steal others' speed, though for a time he could only do it by killing them. He practiced this skill to be able to do it non-lethally as well though. With his new godlike speed, August was able to move so fast as to create duplicates of himself at any given time, allowing him to give the illusion that he and Godspeed were different people, which is pretty damn sick, considering the alternatives are Speed Mirage and Time Remnant, which aren't exactly the same thing but are still fairly similar. And it's 7, Earth X. There's little known about the Earth X version of Barry Allen. Known as Blitzkrieg in this reality, he's a fascist version of the Flash working alongside Dark Arrow and Overgirl, the Oliver Queen and Kara Zor-El of Earth X, who are also married, but that's a story for another day. In the Arrow vs. Crisis on Earth X crossover, Earth X Barry is actually nowhere to be seen. Instead, he's replaced by Reverse Flash, the Eobard Thawne of Earth 1. Even though on the animated show The Ray, which takes place on Earth X, there is a fascist Barry, so what happened? It's largely assumed that between his last appearance in the show and in the crossover, that Thawne arrived and took his chance to kill at least a version of Barry, even if it wasn't his own. Hence why the other Earth Xers were so trusting of Thawne, since he had bested their Barry. I don't know how this Barry got his powers without the particle accelerator, but what I do know is that even the Joker refused to work with the Red Skull when he realized that he was actually a fascist and not some kook in a wildly inappropriate costume, saying that he may be a psychopath, but he's an American psychopath, or something along those lines. So, Reverse Flash is worse than Joker confirmed. Like, this wasn't even a Reverse Flash who was raised in the fascist life. He just wanted to help out, which is messed up as hell. And at 6, Zoom. Hunter Zolomon was a serial killer from Earth 2, also known as the maniacal super speedster known as Zoom. Having gotten tired of being the villain, Hunter decided to also become the hero after capturing Jay Garrick, the Flash from Earth 3, masquerading as Jay to gain Barry Allen's trust. When he was 11, Hunter saw his father kill his mother. Hunter's father ended up in jail, and Hunter was raised in the foster care system since no relative wanted him. Hunter later became a convicted serial killer and was going through electroshock therapy when Earth 2 Harrison Wells' particle accelerator exploded underground. This ended up connecting him to the Speed Force and he escaped. Zolomon killed some police officers on his way out and left one to tell his story. The one police officer said he saw a man zooming around, giving Zolomon the alias of Zoom. Zoom later then killed that police officer in his house. Halfway through into number 5, The Rival. Edward Claris is the Rival, the archenemy of Golden Age Flash Jay Garrick. Claris was a chemistry professor at the university attended by Jay Garrick. He believed that he had recreated the formula that gave Garrick his speed. Bitter at the rejection of his research claims by the scientific community though, Claris became a criminal wearing a darker version of the Flash's outfit, the original Reverse Flash. The effects of this version of the formula however proved to be temporary and he was defeated when it expended. Decades later though, following the reformation of the Justice Society of America, Claris was retrieved from the Speed Force, because he had been put in there at some point, by the interdimensional supercriminal Johnny Sorrow, who invited him to join the new Injustice Society. Now composed of pure speed energy, Claris possessed Garrick's friend and fellow Golden Age speedster Max Mercury to get the Flash's attention. Rival committed a series of swift, gruesome murders at locations that, when mapped out, would spell out a message. We don't talk about the Arrowverse version, though. Like, I know his suit was meant to be similar to Daniel West's Reverse Flash, but come on. And at 4, Johnny Quick. Johnny Allen, alias Johnny Quick, is a criminal speedster from Earth 3. Together with his girlfriend and partner in crime Atomica, he was a member of the crime syndicate. Johnny Allen was a high-profile criminal on the run with his equally criminal girlfriend, cornered on the roof of Central City's Star Labs. Allen was struck by a bolt of lightning which shattered the roof, and the duo fell into the lab space below, with Allen landing amid some chemicals. Obviously, this is the thing that ended up granting him his super speed, and he went on to become a super criminal alongside his girlfriend who had also been empowered. He took on the name of Johnny Quick, while his girlfriend took on the name of Atomica. The couple joined the crime syndicate at some point after this. Johnny Quick, as he now called himself, ran through Central City answering to no one, until the day the White House burned, around the time of Darkseid's incursion onto Earth Prime. The being that had destroyed Ultraman's Krypton came to Earth, and an alliance of super criminals formed to find a way to safety. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Red Death. Red Death is a speedster that is an evil combination of Batman and the Flash, which already sounds terrifying, but wait till you hear his story. The Bruce Wayne of Earth 52 started off fighting crime with Robin, but Robins kept dying left, right, and center. So understandably, Batman got darker and darker, becoming more extreme with his, let's call them methods. Which honestly seems more realistic to me, aside from just quitting fighting crime. Which can't happen, otherwise we wouldn't have this story, right? And DC wouldn't make any money. This eventually leads him to Barry Allen, who refuses to give Bruce his Speed Force powers. So Batman, using the various rogues' weapons to fight off Barry, knocked him out. Once Barry was unconscious, Bruce tied him to the front of a cosmic treadmill-powered Batmobile and drove them both into the Speed Force. I don't even know how that happened or worked logically, but okay, you do you, Bat Marty. When entering the Speed Force though, Barry and Bruce ended up fusing together into an evil Batman with super speed and a lust for killing, while Barry's mind was trapped in Bruce's body. He then gets a visit from the Batman Who Laughs, who asks him to join the Dark Knights, whose goal is conquering the multiverse. Penultimately, in at number 2, Savitar. As a fan of the Arrowverse, I felt like I needed to include one of the most interesting speedsters in the show. Savitar, while sharing a name with another evil speedster from the comics, is actually revealed to be a time remnant of Barry Allen in the show, being more of a future Flash than a Savitar. Honestly, he's like a combination of both. His story, though, is pretty messed up. In essence, making himself and having a classic chicken and the egg scenario. In the post-Flashpoint Arrowverse timeline, Savitar comes back from the future to kill Iris West before her and Barry get married. This causes Barry to create as many time remnants as possible, which is basically a clone of himself, in order to stop him. But Savitar kills all of them except one. The one that he spares then gets shunned by the rest of Team Flash for not being the real Barry Allen, even though he is still the real Barry. It's weird. So in an act of fury, the Time Remnant runs back in time, creating a new identity for himself as the first speedster and the god of speed known as Savitar. But the suit he wears allows him to travel at basically instantaneous speeds, which the show Flash has not been able to do at this point, even in recent seasons. And finally, in at number 1, Reverse Flash. I know what you're thinking, okay? Isn't Eobard just the Reverse Flash? Like, not actually a version of the Flash? In the main continuity, yes, but also thinking of the Flash Armageddon crossover, Barry Allen becomes the Reverse Flash, so this could be another literal evil version of the Flash. But in the Dark Multiverse Flashpoint story, Eobard also becomes the Flash, and he kind of becomes his own form of hero in a way. A dark, twisted, messed up hero, hell-bent on eradicating competing heroes in the universe, but still a form of hero, right? Technically it counts. And I mean, like, he's still scary, alright? And a version of the Flash, so this counts for this list. In a universe where Barry Allen dies while trying to get his powers back with Flashpoint Batman, aka Thomas Wayne. But once Thawne tried to stop the war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman by threatening them and killing Arthur, you know there's gonna be some hell to pay. So he sets on shaping the world in his own image. This involves preventing Batman from ever becoming Batman and instead creating his own superhero team, full of versions of characters we know and love, but all with Reverse Flash logos somewhere on their suits, usually. And I have to say, preventing Batman from being created is probably the smartest thing Eobard could have done, because either way, Batman is going to lead some form of resistance against you, so good on you. This is the smartest thing that any villain has ever done in the DC universe.
Number 10, Kane Parker. Kane was one of the first evil clones ever made of Spider-Man, and really, he wasn't evil of his own choosing. He was kind of just a bad dude because he was so defective and was quickly degenerating. His degeneration made Kane somewhat insane, and his powers also didn't help. His own version of Spider-Sense was more precognitive, giving him visions of the future. The problem? With each vision he viewed, he would become more and more unhinged. Kane Parker would start out as being more of a sinister figure, but as time went on, he'd really become more of a moody anti-hero in the comics. In some cases, he was also only originally an antagonist because his motives were misunderstood by Peter. Number 9, the Jackal. At one point, another clone who was previously considered to be one of the best clones with the most potential for good also turned to the dark side. Yes, this clone was none other than Ben Reilly. Having recalled all of his deaths from when Miles was experimenting on Ben in an attempt to perfect the cloning process, Ben became somewhat unhinged. He ended up defeating and killing Miles Warren only to bring him back as a clone and convince Miles to work for him. This would result in Ben adopting the mantle of the Jackal for himself and building a clone army of Spider-Man's previously dead friends, allies, and even villains, as well as building the New U Technologies Corporation. In exchange for the clones' cooperation, Ben provided them with pills that would help to stave off the degeneration while he worked to perfect the cloning process himself, and a frequency technology that would substitute the pill for, well, likely only a chosen few, because Ben probably wanted to control the other clones. He was like, I'm good, but also I'm kind of controlling you. Well, he meant well. When Peter was approached to join the Jackal, who was revealed to him to be Ben, he simply refused, believing that the Jackal was a perfect example of having all the power, but none of the responsibility. And friends, before we move on to this this next spot if you are loving this list and you want another list like it where we talk about even more evil Spider-Man. Be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. There are surprisingly a lot of evil Spider-Men out there. Number 8. Ghost Spider. While redeemed in the end, initially when we met Peter Parker, who was to become Ghost Spider, we would learn of just how evil he was. Ghost Spider is the Peter Parker from Reality Earth 11618, where he was previously known as simply the Amazing Spider. Not to be confused with Ghost Spider, who is Gwen Stacy from an alternate reality. I think that's Earth 65. So now there's kind of two Ghost Spiders, but anyways. This version of Ghost Spider makes an appearance in the 2011 ASM Annual number 38. Here we learn what happens when Uncle Ben does not die but instead gets to live out his life alongside his nephew. He ends up teaching Peter that with great power comes a great responsibility to keep said power. As a result, he ends up training Peter, who eventually not only becomes a successful hero, but also a successful businessman and a successful scientist. Uncle Ben and Peter decide to use their scientific knowledge to lure other Spider-Men from the multiverse to their reality, and then drain them of their power to be used to booster or bolster the Amazing Spider's own abilities and powers, making him even more powerful with each transfer. However, the Spider-Man of Earth 616, when caught in this trap, was able to convince the Amazing Spider that what he was doing was pretty wrong. In the end, he sacrificed his own powers and life to help the Spider-Man of 616 escape. However, he didn't actually die, but ended up in a coma, with his soul trapped in hell. Eventually, he would awaken and return as Ghost Spider. Redemption, baby. Number 7. Poison. Poison is the alternate version of Peter Parker who comes from the What If version of the other story. In this version of the story, Peter abandons the spider within himself. This leaves Peter detached and vulnerable. Sensing this, the Venom symbiote leaves its then host, Matt Gargan, in pursuit of Peter Parker, who is still within his cocoon. The symbiote forcibly bonds with Peter and emerges from the cocoon as a new entity that goes by the name of Poison. Instinctively returning to Mary Jane, it then attempts to convince her to join its side, but terrified of what both the symbiote and what Peter have become, she rejects them. Ultimately, they decide to dig up the body of Gwen Stacy and make her their new partner in crime. Yikes. Poison is all around just bad news. Very, very evil. Very spooky. Not that all spooky things need to be evil, just to be clear. Number 6. Zombie Peter. This alternate version of Peter Parker hails from Earth 2149, sometimes referred to as Earth Z or the Marvel Zombieverse. In this reality, Peter did his best to hold out and avoid becoming infected, but ultimately did succumb to that after being bitten by Steve Rogers, known as Colonel America in this reality. After being bitten, Spider-Man began to transform into a zombie. Before the change overtook him, he hoped to get Aunt May and Mary Jane somewhere safe and returned home, only to be overcome by the infection. As a result, he ended up eating both of his loved ones, unable to resist the hunger he felt deep inside himself. Spider-Man in this reality goes on to become one of the zombie Galacti, taking on the power cosmic after eating Galactus. However, in the end, he's also one of the few surviving zombies who aims to prevent the spread of the zombie plague to other universes, eventually becoming a hero once more. As so many evil Spider-Men do, they always come around in the end, even if they're a zombie. Number 5. Spider Carnage. Spider Carnage hails from the 90s animated Spider-Man series. Here, Spider Carnage hailed from an alternate reality where after being cloned and losing both his Aunt May and his Uncle Ben, he began to question whether or not he was the real Peter Parker or the clone himself. As this version of Peter was filled with rage, Carnage entered his world via a portal and bonded with this alternate version of Peter Parker, who then became Spider Carnage. Spider Carnage threatened the existence of the entire multiverse, and it took a team of heroic Spider-Men coming together to stop him. Eventually, he was convinced by his still living alternate version of Uncle Ben that what he was doing was wrong, but was unable to remove the Carnage symbiote from him at that point, so he ultimately sacrificed himself to save the world from the evil of Carnage, and kind of the evil of himself, because he was so filled with rage and hate. Number 4. Patient Zero. This version of Peter hails from the reality belonging to the series Marvel Universe vs. the Punisher, the reality of 11080, where Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, was the last known survivor who was forced to take on, you guessed it, the entire Marvel Universe, after the world was ravaged by a deadly and horrifying plague. Here, Peter ends up becoming Patient Zero after a virus, which is the plague, is accidentally released that turns people into violent cannibals. Peter himself devours Rhino during a hockey match and is taken to be researched by the Fantastic Four. However, he does not stay quarantined as the virus spreads to Ben Grimm of the FF, who then releases him. He goes on to become the leader of one of the cannibalistic tribes involved in a turf war. The Punisher ends up killing him after helping helping to rescue a pregnant Mary Jane in exchange for information that patient Zero has. I don't think this version of Spider-Man is ever really fully redeemed. He does try to save Mary Jane though, so that's something. Number 3, Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell has to be one of the most evil incarnations of Spider-Man around. He's evil to the core. He literally becomes a Spider-Man, turning into a spider-like human hybrid after he is bit by a radioactive spider. Patton was also kind of always a creepy kid, likely as a result of mistreatment that he suffered at the mercy of his Uncle Ted. He had a crush on his next door neighbor, Sarah Jane, and enjoyed disturbing scientific pursuits such as burning ants with a magnifying glass. What fun. When he transformed into Spider-Man, he became more confident in himself, but also acquired a taste for live animal and human flesh. He also was capable of laying eggs, as Uncle Ted would horrifyingly and personally find out after young Patton took revenge on him. That's all I'll say about that, but we might be showing you a scary panel of that right now. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the editor's doing in this video, but cue scary panel of Ted having spiders coming out of him. Ugh. Number 2, the Spider. This is a version of Peter Parker who also merged with the Carnage symbiote, and was possibly driven criminally insane by it. Or was criminally insane to begin with in this reality perhaps. This version of Peter hails from the reality of Earth 15. Not much is known about his home reality, mainly what we know of it involved Peter's own history. This alternate version of the character bonded with the alien symbiote that is often referred to as Carnage on Earth 616. He became an infamous mass murderer who apparently enjoys hurting people. He made his first appearance in The Exiles in issue number 12, where he showed up with a team of other heroes who were drafted into a multiversal version of Weapon X. I mean, they are heroes there, but they also kinda shady, you know? I mean, not all of them are, but definitely Spider is. Number 1, Wolf Spider. Wolf Spider comes from the animated show Ultimate Spider-Man. He was an alternate version of Peter Parker who hailed from the reality of Earth 16827 and was bad to the bone. Unlike many other alternate versions of Spider-Man, for some reason Wolf Spider became a villain instead of a hero when his spider-like powers manifested. He was a merciless killer, fighting to oppose anyone who fought on the side of good, was a hero, or believed in the ideal of responsibility. He even ended up killing his own reality's version of Miles Morales. And if that doesn't make you evil, I don't know what is, because Miles Morales is the best, and he's such a sweetheart. How dare you do that, Wolf Spider? I can't abide.
Coming in at number 10, we've got Bat Zorro from Bizarro World. Hailing from the planet founded by Superman's own twisted doppelganger, Bat Zorro is the self-proclaimed world's worst detective, and spends his nights shooting down couples in Crime Alley as an awful inversion of Bruce Wayne's motivation for being Batman. More of a weird comedic foil to Batman than an actual supervillain threat, Bat Zorro would eventually try to redeem himself by fighting the Joker and jumping in front of a bullet meant for the real Batman, meaning maybe Bat Zorro had a little bit of good in him after all. Coming in at number 9, we have the Red Death. The first of many Dark Knights on this list, twisted variants of Bruce Wayne that banded together to escape their dying dark multiverse, the Red Death is a chilling example of what Batman could become if he cared more for his mission than he did for his friends. After the deaths of many of his allies in Gotham City, this version of Batman determined that he was more worthy of using the Speed Force than Barry Allen, and could have saved Robin's life if he was only a bit faster. Unfortunately, this version of Bruce took this plan way too far, capturing the Flash and combining his powers into himself, becoming the Red Death and forcing Barry Allen's consciousness to watch as he began killing every supervillain on the planet and continued his rampage across the entire multiverse. Coming in at number 8, we have the Dawnbreaker. In a dark multiverse world where Bruce Wayne was the one gifted a Green Lantern ring instead of Hal Jordan, this version of Bruce quickly became frustrated with all of the restrictions the Lantern Corps placed on his ring and his ability to wield emotions. Killing every criminal he encountered, Batman's power grew as he combined his ring with the darkness in his own heart, becoming known as the Dawnbreaker as he systematically wiped out every other Green Lantern in the galaxy. By the time he was done, he was the only lantern-wielding entity left in his universe, and joined the Dark Knights in order to find more victims to punish. Coming in at number 7, we have OWLMAN, the evil opposite of Bruce Wayne from the inverted Earth 3. Born under the name of Thomas Wayne Jr., as a young boy, OWLMAN murdered his younger brother Bruce and had his butler Alfred kill his parents to ensure that the Wayne fortune was not wasted by their frivolous spending. Using his costumed identity as OWLMAN to intimidate the leaders of Gotham into falling under his control, OWLMAN was a twisted version of everything that Batman stood for, and every time their universes have crossed over has led to some incredibly dramatic battles. And speaking of evil Batman named Thomas Wayne, coming in at number 6, we have the Batman of the Flashpoint universe, aka Thomas Wayne Sr. In a world where Bruce was gunned down by Joe Chill instead of his parents, Thomas Wayne became a dark and murderous red-tinted Batman, while Martha would be cursed to become this universe's version of the Joker. While initially an anti-hero ally during the first reveal of the Flashpoint universe, this Batman would go on to become a threat to the real Batman when he returned to the main DC universe and allied himself with Bane in order to get Bruce to quit being Batman forever. There's probably an easier way to get your son to stop being a superhero than allying yourself with a supervillain, but hey, I guess that's just some Wayne family drama that will continue to unfold as Thomas Wayne continues to make his way through the DC multiverse. Coming in at number 5, we have the Merciless, another of the Dark Knights. In an alternate universe in which Ares, the god of war, declared war against all of existence, Batman stood with the rest of the Justice League in a battle that literally lasted for eons, until the sole combatants left in the entire universe were Ares and Batman, still standing through sheer willpower alone. After landing a blow that knocked Ares' magical helmet off, Batman was forced to put the helmet on to finally defeat the God of War, leaving him the only survivor of this burned-out universe. This Batman unfortunately became addicted to the power and bloodlust granted to him by the helmet, and joined forces with the rest of the Dark Knights in order to survive the destruction of his universe, going forth to find new worlds for him to become a new God of War against. Coming in at number 4, we've got another of the Dark Knights with Murder Machine. This version of Bruce Wayne comes from a universe very similar to the main DC continuity until the tragic death of Alfred Pennyworth at the hands of multiple Batman villains. Heartbroken and traumatized by the footage of the incident, Batman convinces his friend CYBORG to recreate Alfred's personality as an artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, this AI takes its task of protecting Batman far too literally, altering his brain chemistry to erase any sense of fear and completely replacing Bruce's frail human body with a metal replacement. Taking the name of Murder Machine, this Batman spread the Alfred AI throughout Gotham and was able to kill every criminal in Arkham Asylum, showing what would truly happen if Batman didn't have a heart. Coming in at number 3, we have the Devastator, a horrifying combination of Batman and Doomsday. This story takes place on one of the many dark multiverse worlds that saw Superman going rogue and taking over the entire planet, even murdering his own wife. To stop the demented Man of Steel, this Batman was forced to ingest the Doomsday virus, a last-ditch effort to save the planet that gave Bruce the strength to kill Superman, but at the terrible cost of his own mind. Furthermore, the Doomsday virus began to spread off Bruce's body and kill off the rest of this world, dooming the planet anyways, and leaving the Devastator as a beast-like Batman waiting for the rest of the Dark Knights to save him from his collapsing planet and give him a new target to hunt, even if eventually this Doomsday Batman hybrid would be defeated by, you guessed it, the real Superman. Coming in at number 2, we have the Emperor of Shadow, aka Bruce Wayne. In a recent one-off issue entitled Batman Superman Authority Special, Batman discovers a reality from the dark multiverse where Ra's al Ghul's plans to dominate humanity have come to pass, and the League of Shadows has become an Empire of Shadows. empires, controlling the entire world. To make matters worse, the leader of this empire is a Bruce Wayne who gave in to Ra's al Ghul's teachings and embraced his position as the world's new emperor. While Batman and Superman were eventually able to destroy the link between this world and the regular DC universe in order to prevent an invasion, this twisted version of Bruce Wayne is still out there, likely biding his time until the next opportunity arises for the dark multiverse to attack the regular multiverse once again. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Batman Who Laughs. In a dark alternate world where the Joker realizes he's dying and begins a mass killing spree of everyone in Gotham, Batman is forced to finally kill his fated foe. Unfortunately, at the moment of death, Bruce was infected with a special brand of Joker venom that completely flipped his moral compass, but left intact all of his intelligence and planning. All of the chaos of the Joker with the brains of Batman, this supervillain is Bruce Wayne's worst nightmare come to life, and so far remains the most evil and deadly variant to ever be seen across the entire dark multiverse.